In 1861, the United States didn't declare war on another nation. It declared war on itself. For 4 years, Americans fought Americans. Brothers wore different uniforms. Families were divided by politics, geography, and belief. By the time the fighting ended, somewhere between 620,000 and 750,000 soldiers were dead, more American military deaths than in every other U.S. war until the 21st century combined. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. Today, it's easy to assume the United States was always destined to remain one country. It wasn't. For much of the Civil War, the Confederacy looked capable of winning its independence. If just a few key moments had unfolded differently, North America might contain two separate nations today. So, what changed? Was it better generals? Superior industry? A bold political gamble? Or something else entirely? The answer begins decades before the first cannon fired. By the middle of the 19th century, the United States looked united on a map, but beneath the surface, it was becoming two very different societies. The North was transforming rapidly. Cities expanded, factories multiplied, and railroads connected growing industries across thousands of miles. Millions of immigrants arrived to work in an economy increasingly driven by manufacturing and commerce. The South followed a different path. Its wealth depended on vast plantations producing cotton, tobacco, and other cash crops. Cotton alone became one of the world's most valuable exports, earning the nickname King Cotton. But that prosperity rested on the labor of nearly 4 million enslaved African Americans. Slavery wasn't simply part of Southern life. It was the foundation of its economy and a major source of its political influence. As both regions developed in different directions, their disagreements became impossible to ignore. The question was no longer whether they disagreed. It was whether they could continue sharing the same government. Every time the United States gained new territory, the same argument returned. Would slavery be allowed to expand? For many Americans, this was a moral issue. For politicians, it was also a fight over power. Every new free state strengthened Northern influence in Congress. Every new slave state strengthened Southern influence. For decades, lawmakers tried to delay conflict through compromises. Each agreement bought a little more time, but none solved the underlying problem. Then came the election of 1860. Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln won the presidency without carrying a single Southern state. Lincoln had campaigned against the expansion of slavery into new territories, not its immediate abolition where it already existed. Yet many Southern leaders believed his election meant their political influence was coming to an end. Within weeks, South Carolina voted to leave the Union. 6 more states quickly followed. Their reasons weren't a mystery. Several Confederate states stated in their official declarations of secession that protecting slavery was central to their decision. The United States had reached its breaking point, but there was still one final chance to avoid war. That chance disappeared on the morning of April 12, 1861. Before sunrise, Confederate artillery opened fire on Fort Sumter, a Union fort in Charleston Harbor. For 34 hours, cannon fire pounded the isolated garrison until its commander surrendered. The bombardment caused surprisingly few casualties. Its political impact, however, was enormous. The attack transformed a constitutional crisis into a civil war. Across both North and South, thousands of young men volunteered, convinced the conflict would be over within weeks. Almost everyone was wrong. Instead, the nation was about to enter 4 years of destruction unlike anything it had ever experienced. And in those first months, it wasn't the Union that seemed destined to win. It was the Confederacy. The South entered the war with one major advantage: experience. Many of America's finest military officers had chosen to fight for the Confederacy, including General Robert E. Lee. Although Lee personally opposed secession, he refused to fight against his home state of Virginia. His decision gave the Confederacy one of history's most respected commanders. The Union had more men, more factories, and a stronger economy. But armies aren't won on paper. They're won by leadership. That became painfully clear in July 1861, at the First Battle of Bull Run. Many spectators arrived carrying picnic baskets, expecting to watch a quick Union victory before returning home. Instead, They watched Union soldiers retreat in chaos as Confederate forces drove them from the battlefield. The defeat shattered the North's confidence. This wouldn't be a short war. And over the next year, Confederate victories continued to pile up. Under Lee and Stonewall Jackson, Southern armies repeatedly defeated larger Union forces through bold tactics and brilliant battlefield leadership. By the summer of 1862, many people began asking an uncomfortable question. Could the Confederacy actually win? President Abraham Lincoln knew the Union desperately needed a victory, not just to boost morale, but to change the direction of the war itself. That opportunity arrived near a quiet creek in Maryland called Antietam. On September 17, 1862, Union and Confederate armies collided in what became the bloodiest single day in American history. More than 22,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing before sunset. Neither side won a decisive battlefield victory, but Lee's invasion of the North had been stopped. For Lincoln, that was enough. 5 days later, he issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, announcing that enslaved people in states still in rebellion would be declared free beginning January 1, 1863. The proclamation didn't immediately end slavery. Instead, it transformed the war. The Union was no longer fighting only to preserve the nation. It was now fighting against slavery itself. That decision changed how the world viewed the conflict, and it would soon give the Union something it desperately needed: more soldiers. The Emancipation Proclamation did more than redefine the Union's purpose. It also opened the door for African Americans to fight for it. By the end of the war, nearly 180,000 black soldiers and 20,000 black sailors had joined the Union war effort. Many were formerly enslaved men who were now fighting for their own freedom. Despite unequal pay and the risk of execution or re-enslavement if captured, thousands volunteered. Their service strengthened the Union Army at a time when it desperately needed more manpower. Even so, the Confederacy continued to resist. Lincoln still faced another problem. His generals had repeatedly failed to turn the North's overwhelming resources into victory. Then he found the commander he had been searching for, Ulysses S. Grant. Unlike many Union generals before him, Grant wasn't looking for one perfect battle. He understood that the North's greatest advantage wasn't superior tactics, it was superior resources. The Union had more factories, more railroads, more food, more soldiers. If those advantages could be used continuously, the Confederacy would eventually run out of men and supplies. So when Lincoln promoted Grant to command all Union armies in 1864, he gave him one simple mission: keep moving forward. Grant's strategy was costly. Battles such as the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor claimed tens of thousands of lives. Critics called him a butcher, but unlike previous commanders, Grant refused to retreat after heavy losses. Every battle weakened Lee's army a little more, while the Union could replace what it had lost. At the same time, General William Tecumseh Sherman captured Atlanta before launching his famous march to the sea, destroying railroads, factories, and military infrastructure across Georgia. His goal wasn't simply to defeat Confederate armies. It was to destroy the South's ability to continue fighting. By early 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. Food was running out. Railroads were failing. Desertions were increasing. On April 9, 1865, Robert E. Lee met Grant at Appomattox Courthouse and surrendered the Confederacy's largest army. The war was finally over, or so it seemed. Just 5 days later, President Abraham Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. During the performance, Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth shot him. Lincoln died the next morning, never seeing the nation he had fought to preserve begin rebuilding. Later that year, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery throughout the United States. The Civil War settled two questions that had divided the nation since its founding. Slavery would no longer be legal, and no state could simply leave the Union. The United States had survived, but at a cost almost beyond imagination. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost, entire communities were devastated, and the scars of the war would shape American politics and society for generations. More than 160 years later, its legacy still echoes across the nation. reminding us that the United States as we know it today was not inevitable. It was forged in its darkest and bloodiest chapter. If you enjoyed this documentary, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more stories that changed the course of history. Thanks for watching.